You'd think I know to unmute by now, wouldn't you? Hello, lovely humans. Do feel free to rename yourselves, stating where you are in the world, if you like, so that we can all know where we're tuning in from. If you're watching on the replay or on the live stream, we'll be starting in about 6 minutes. This is the to make sure I've got the right session. This is the weird things you do that you don't recognize as from with Ilan and Patricia. Those of you who are here already, feel free to type in the chat. What are you looking forward to today's? To today's session? What's the one thing that's on your mind that you think this session could help you with? Or what request you come to this session with for yourself? Maybe you can share that in the chat. Oh, I see we've got people from the Netherlands joining. Hello, Holland. We'll be starting in about 5 minutes, so you have a little bit of time to get some water, move around. Also notice your patterns, those of you who are here early, if you have a tendency to kind of be set up for things, or if you have a tendency to show up last minute. Or if you don't want to type in the chat what you're looking forward to today's session, maybe you can type what you have been enjoying so far. Have you watched any sessions already? Did you attend yesterday? Some of the talks yesterday? What is your takeaway from that? I know Mark usually encourages to write in the chat, so as for you to really claim it and be able to remind yourself, and also for sharing with the group. Groups are a valuable resource, I think. Always, not only when dealing with trauma. Hello, nice to see some faces. I see something that looks like a Greek name in the chat. I don't know if it is. In the participants. Hello to Finland. Hello, good morning. We'll be starting in 3 minutes. Feel free to rename yourselves and put your location. Hello, Pamela. Hello, Saki, Savafa in the UK. Hello, Arndt. I hope I'm not killing your name. Megan, Liz, Fiona. Withington, I actually know where that is. I used to take trains that used to pass from there. Bettina in Germany, hello. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Yeah, you can type in the chat whilst we're waiting where you are or what you're looking forward to in this session. And also, if you watched any of yesterday's sessions and you found something really valuable, you can share that with the group as well. Like, what was your one takeaway, or what are you looking forward to today? I'll be starting exactly on the hour. Picked up this series from a friend, yes. Spreading this work is very, very important to a lot of us. So I'll be hitting record in a minute. Okay, for some reason, it's not showing me when I speak on the screen. This is weird. Better. Okay, so hello everybody and welcome to the weird things that you don't recognize as trauma. And this session is led by Ilan Stefani, who is a trauma educator. Ilan is a best-selling author and researcher in the fields of sexuality, spirituality, collective trauma healing, and embodiment. Having been a sex worker in the past, Ilan has had firsthand experience in coming back from difficult places and turning tough stuff into fuel for truly living. And also with her is Patricia Aguirre. She's a therapist and a yoga teacher. She's a specialist in developmental trauma. She integrates her knowledge and experience of 20 plus years on Eastern philosophies together with trauma sensitive methods such as transactional analysis, systemic therapy, and emotionally focused therapy. Patricia is somebody that young yogis want to be when they grow up, and they'll be leading the session together. This is a pre-recorded session, so our presenters are also taking their own advice and not binge presenting everything. So this was pre-recorded because there is a lot of sessions they're presenting this week. So they took time out to pre-record some in advance. I'm Virginia. I'll be hosting you during the session. So for any Zoom questions or technical stuff, feel free to private message me. Thanks to all of those of you who are here live. This means you have purchased the all access pass. You've done the smart thing. There's a lot of good talks. Feel free to type in the chat what you're looking forward to in this session, what your takeaways so far have been. Just a word of caution about resourcefulness, and if you're feeling not very well resourced, like if you aren't well enough to drive a car, then maybe don't watch. Okay, make sure that this is kind to you to watch this. Are you better served perhaps by one-to-one therapy? Remember, this is education. It's not therapy. It's not designed for people that are currently in the worst of trauma. Now, many of our teachers have been there themselves, so no judgment, but you do need a level of robustness for these sessions. A reminder not to binge. There will be replays announced. You'll be getting emails for that if you haven't gotten that already. If you tense up, if you get agitated, or if you find yourself spacing out, move, breathe, get away from the screen. You can always watch later. Resource yourselves with moving, breathing, good company, and nature. I'm outside under a tree, which I find helpful. Having said all that, I wish you to enjoy this session with Ilan and Patricia, and I'll start sharing my screen and my sound so we can get on with it. There we go. That didn't go well. Let's take two.
Yay. Okay. Thank you for being weird all together with us. Let's share about the weird things that we are doing that we do not recognize as trauma. And I think even though they might be related to your trauma, it's not about this session to be a heavy one. It's about sharing, it's about exploring, it's about radical curiosity. And it is about, I think, exploring something all together that we are meeting in our own weird lives anyway. So, Patricia, thank you so much for joining me, sitting with me in this topic and in this session. And yeah, handing over to you.
Thank you, thank you. It's an honor, Ilan. I told her that she's the queen of this course, so I feel lucky to be beside her for today's session. And I personally love the word weird in this title, the weird things that we do that we don't know that are trauma. Because for a very long time, and I know from sharing spaces with many other people and from my personal experience, that at some time when we see our reactions on our symptoms, we have no other option than label it as bad or flawed or wrong or sick. And unfortunately, sometimes we meet people who actually confirm that at some point. Hopefully, that was just my case and not other people's.
And mine. We are just the last exceptions on Earth.
Yes, luckily. So that's why I really love the word weird in this phrase, right? The weird things that we do that we don't know that are trauma. And one of the things that I really like about the way we are sharing trauma today and in this course in general is taking a look at how it makes sense and why it makes sense that we react the way we do, whether that's withdrawing whenever there's a loving person in front of you. And it doesn't make sense, but it really makes sense once we get into our stories, into our bodies, into a wider perspective, maybe. So, welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. I really want to emphasize what you say, Patricia, around looking at trauma in a way that makes sense, because trauma makes most perfect sense in just every moment, because it's coming from our perfect nervous system being designed perfectly for handling overwhelming situations and holding onto them until we found a space that's that safe that we can release the stress from the past. But the tragic thing is, and I can share from my personal experience, but also from countless stories I heard from others, they, me, whoever realizes I'm acting in ways, I'm behaving in ways that do not serve me, that do not make sense. So I blame myself. And like nowadays, when I recall all those situations where I blamed myself, it's like every time nowadays I see myself slapping into my own face. Sorry for using this rough language, but there is something brutal about that. There is something of, oh, wow, sweetie, wow, you are begging for life, and then you are beating yourself up. So I really want to stretch what you said around, let's explore ways how we can look at trauma in the way it is. And the moment we look at trauma in the way it is, the moment it makes sense. And then we can move on from there. But otherwise, we are so stuck in just another layer of confusion.
Yeah, thank you.
Hmm.
Yeah. I would really also emphasize on what you say, this movement of blame, of shame, that's a very big component of trauma. Not in every case, not everyone lives it as like a lived shame, like walking around thinking something wrong is gonna happen soon because either the environment is unsafe or I am flawed and
Mhm.
everyone will notice or something will crash at some point. And this is usually lived very as a very alone, like a lonely experience, right? Like I'm the only one who's seeing this, and this is like the worst thing that's happening. And I would love to just point out that many of us go through that, right?
And also, I think when we talk about the shame or something bad will happen or I'm wrong or I'm flawed or whatever, in language it's so tricky because it's so concrete. It's like I'm walking around expecting something bad. But for example, I'm an expert in self-hatred just because I really, really come from so many layers of just deep, deep, deep subconscious global belief system. I am wrong. I am just so wrong. And nobody could explain. My parents even wanted to get me. I mean, wow, I had enough to eat every day of my childhood. I had loving parents, but there is something not abstract, it is still concrete, but it shows up as an abstract background vibe or background feeling of I am wrong because I made it up in order to make sense of my hypersensitivity in an unsensitive world. And that is something so destructive that you do to yourself, even though you are not traumatizing yourself, you are just trying to digest in a weird and tragic way in yourself that you can't cope with the outer world. And to some extent, unfortunately, that's true for all of us. We are born into a world that isn't easy to get along in. It's just nowadays super, super complicated, but also it's super fast paced. It's just not the pace of the world around, is just not the pace of a healthy nervous system, period, for nobody. So the weird thing, for example, that I did to myself is something I can still track it when I'm under stress. And that is, it's like a daily dose of energetic depression, mainly coming from worry or bad news. It's a daily injection of the world isn't safe and it's not on my side. It won't support me thriving. It won't support my freedom or my unfolding of my essence. Quite the opposite. It's putting blocks and stones in front of my feet. It doesn't want me to move on. It doesn't want me to be happy. So there is something like that when I feel, for example, in my business or in my private life, things were going really well. At the end of the day, I watch some news, go to bed with worry. At the end of the day, I mess it up. The more I'm stressed, the more I can track this pattern. Doesn't make any sense, but I survived my childhood coming from the blame that I'm not meant to be happy in this world because I'm not right. I'm not good enough. I'm not normal. I don't have the ticket for the thriving life. So I can still see my harming myself in a micro dose. But this is so weird. And then I hear people talking to me, Ilan, every day I'm like a junkie of bad news. This doesn't make sense. And I'm like, that makes perfect sense. Sorry to say, but welcome to the club. So just one example, it doesn't make sense, but it makes perfect sense because at the end of the day, I can only fall asleep when the world is going into the right direction. And the right direction is the used direction. Being in my childhood, trapped in my childhood, my childish narrative around the world, my childish kind of matrix of the world, it makes sense when I'm wrong and the world around is against me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. I was gonna refer to another example that's I would say it's similar and more like environment versus personal, right? And how I see this coming up too much, I would say, with younger people, more with younger people now with social media. And it's looking at this perfect body woman who looks perfect, who has a perfect life. And we know that it doesn't make me feel good when I check their account, when I see their posts. But then you find yourself going there again. Like, why, right? And people who share these stories, it's like I recognize how bad it makes me feel that it even makes some people take even more harmful steps afterward. And still, I'm there, I'm still there. And whether it's like this artist or celebrity that you don't know, or it's the new partner of your ex, right? And you want to compare yourself to that person, or it's the ex of the person that you're with now, but it's a constant harming yourself, a constant comparison that's always going to leave you feeling less than or not okay, right?
And again, it's like, it doesn't make sense. Why am I binge watching in Instagram accounts? Everybody is richer, more fortunate, happier, more beautiful, and has more followers than you will ever have. Like, why? Why should somebody do that? But secretly, everybody is doing that. We are all addicted to being plan B. We are not the first choice. We do not feel like the walking queen and king in our own body and in our own life. And that's such a common, it's like this kind of loneliness and isolation is the most common one. So to some extent, even though it's so weird, we are so not alone with what makes us feel alone.
Yeah. And it's very difficult to see when you are in this loop how there is a degree, even if it doesn't make sense in a rational mind, but to some degree it's like, yes, I am flawed. Yes, I am not, I do not deserve love as much as everyone deserves it, or I'm not as open to receive this love freely. And those tiny ways of looking at the news, of finding that Instagram account, and it's, oh yes, that's right. That's a confirmation of a trauma response, right?
It ends the moment that you are, let's say, looking at those Instagram accounts or watching the bad news and then going to bed with worry. It's the end of something new. It's the end of something fresh or open with many options in the field. So I think it's very hard to track it when it's happening and very hard to stop it from happening while it's happening. But what you can do is getting a taste of the mood that you are in typically before, the energy level that you have to be in order to want to do that. And that is a great way of entry, not of entry to a heroic stop, I will never do that again, but a kind of following yourself, like holding your hand while you are moving into this dark place, like going consciously into this and just doing everything a little bit slower and with a little bit more of, yeah, she lives in Bali. She has this wonderful, loving boyfriend. I have messed up my second relationship. Yeah, makes sense. I'm bad. I'm wrong. I'm just not compatible with this world. And she is. Something like that. Just slow it down. Just follow your system into this narrative that gives you a weird kind of orientation. Because at the end of the day, it is you start sensing something familiar again. And very often before that, something either uncomfortable or uncontrollable came up, that you are like, oh, I don't want to be in a vague place of freshness. I want to have something that I know how to get along with or not to get along with or whatever. Or something that was very open and also very exciting, like a high level of energy. The moment you are worrying, the moment you are comparing yourself and being the more ugly one, etc., is the moment that this freshness and this high energy level immediately stops. So it almost serves you an energetic function in terms of energetic depression, so much more than providing you some great content. I mean, it's not great content, but it's a great effect. It's very reliable. It's like, wow, flying high. And this I call it collective energetic depression. This collective energetic depression, this low level of energy, that's the story of our era. I mean, the majority of people is burned out, period. So when we are into embodiment, we kind of leave this kind of community feeling in the overall exhaustion. And that in itself is such a challenge for your nervous system.
Yeah. I would think it's good or important to mention also, Ilan, on that note, how there is a degree. I know that this might sound a little bit off-putting if this is maybe the first time that you come in contact with this type of information, but there is a degree of safety in confirming a belief, right? I'm not enough. I still have things to do. I'm not that beautiful. Even when we feel this yuck after we're, like submerged in Instagram for like X amount of minutes, even when we recognize we don't like it, it's important to note, and this is what I hear when you say notice what's being confirmed when you're there, when you're watching that image, when you're making those thoughts. And inside, beyond the judgment, oh yes, that's not good, it's not okay, it's not nice to think, so get off, right? But we don't, or particularly when there's trauma around this, it's hard to disconnect from repeating that action, even when it's harmful. That's the whole point of it, right? This addictive thing. And there's a softness when we touch some sort of beliefs, even when they are not pretty and not where we want to be. And there is a very interesting play going around this trauma and this type of addictive. It might not be an addiction to a substance, but definitely I would mention like addiction to emotions, right? To certain emotions in this case. And it repeats a certain pattern where we want to get to that sense of safety or that sense of calm that in your body it feels like that when I finally get to confirm that.
It's familiar. And there is also a very sweet self-loving spot in that, or essence in that is about when trauma hits us, it ends the whole world. It just throws us out of the universe. It's just it's not possible that this happens. Yet it happens. So trauma is an absolute impact on a very young nervous system that per definition didn't expect that to happen. So after that, what breaks might be individual. What feels like being lost or broken might be individual. However, it's the end of a sense of familiarity that before that we never questioned. We never experienced the sun not getting up in the morning. We just it never happened. So why shouldn't it get up in the morning? And then we are so like bewildered. We never digest this interruption. So then later on, this interruption keeps being inherited and passed on and passed on and passed on. But other things are familiar. I'm never the one that is truly for a happy and ecstatic life, like never. I work on myself like crazy. I'm doing as much as I can, but at the end of the day, it's not enough. The not enoughness is the very familiar thing, and it will never let me down. So there is this very tragic image of my demons are holding me when nobody else does. And there is a sense of being held that essentially is still about you remembering how it is to be held by somebody who deeply, deeply knows you. So I think there is a soft core in that. And the more we can also look at trauma from the unbroken and unbreakable softness from inside, the more we look at trauma in a way, as you said so beautifully, that it makes sense. And the moment it makes sense is the moment it starts speaking with us. It's not a blindfolded thing that's just rigid in our way. It is something that wants to cooperate, and us looking at it in a way it makes sense is us. It's almost like trauma is offering us its hands, and then we can take them, and then we can go into this fruitful dialogue.
Thank you. I really love that moment when you say that that breaking point, that moment when you decide to take the stairs instead of going
Mhm.
continue on that hallway straight, repeating a pattern, right? And how what I sense, and of course, and I guess that Ilan would agree with me on this, every way out of trauma will look very different, even if it's just like finding that point where you take a different road. Everyone's stories are special, are worth respecting their own process. That's what I would say, right? So how finding that softness, as you said, like there's a love in how that trauma response gives you a sense of safety. We're not saying that it's right or that it's good or to stay there even, but if you're able, and if you don't, and if there's another road for you, that's perfect. But sometimes oh god, it feels so safe, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, from a therapy perspective, I know that this might resonate to some of you, not all of you, but keeping that I am wrong and the rest of the world is right is also a way to hold on to the fantasy that my parents are not wrong by doing something bad, and it's me. That's what I
Mhm.
control. So it's best that I keep this fantasy that it's me, so that they stay on this perfect possibility that they might change sometimes and give me that
Mhm.
love. And that breakaway, that breaking point, gives us that possibility of moving into an adulthood that breaks that story, or that leaves that story behind, right? That
Mhm.
story that we made to the best of our ability when we were younger.
Yeah, really, it's exactly this kind of I protect my environment slash in most cases my parents from being humans. And that is at the end of the day what might cost us the looking at humans in a way it makes sense that all of us are humans, and the more it's polished and the more it's perfect or perfectionized, the less it comes from an inner deep peace of wow, I'm unique, I'm so weird, I'm so perfect, I'm so sweet. So I think I think there is a huge chance in us exploring how to recover from trauma and how to recover from those weird addictions that quote unquote do not make any sense, all together at the same time, really inviting the uniqueness of each one of us to break through, and not the kind of healed performance after the idea of brokenness.
Yeah, so this is definitely an encouraging invitation to find those ways where we can start taking
Mhm.
these new steps into a new sense of safety.
Mhm.
And however long it takes, and I always say this, be kind, be nice to yourself, be patient. Be as patient as you would be to a loving child that you can relate to lovingly. Be that way to that child that holds on to this still in yourself.
Mhm. Thank you so much. Oh, wow. Mm.
Okay, folks. Lots of lovely messages there in the chat. People have been writing what they liked, and please feel free to write down your one takeaway from this session. Share it with the group, also for you to really claim it and be able to reflect back on it if you feel like it. Now, replays of all these sessions will be available. You will be getting a relevant email for that. And please do share with a friend, a colleague, someone you know who you think will benefit from it. Stop and think, who do I know that would really thank me for sharing this information? And I'll post the links in the chat there for you so that you can send them over to share. Hang on a minute to give you those links. So here is what you can share with your friends. And for those of you who want to dive deeper, and if you're coaches or facilitators, we do have Ilan's method on a super cheap offer because we want to make it widely available. It's the second link there about your superpower. So have a look into that. It's not the only modality. There's loads of them out there, but if you like Ilan and you want to learn more as facilitators and study in a course with her, we're making this super accessible. So have a look. And I just want to remind you that Ilan will be live in a Zoom session at 1 p.m. UK. All right. And in the meantime, we've got the Q&A with Roger Mills coming up at 12 noon UK. And in half an hour from now, we'll have Mark Walsh and Rhonda Brito on how to take the power back, talking about trauma and forgiveness. So I hope you enjoyed today. I hope we'll see you again. There are the links in the chat for you to share. Thank you so much. And make sure you resource yourself throughout. Take care, everyone. Fabia, good to see you. We stopped the live stream as well. Nice to see familiar faces now.